Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my updated guide to Valby. Now, there were some new mods added into the game that synergize very well with characters that can't build well into crit. Characters like Kyle and Ajax and Freyna get huge benefits from them. However, there's a little bit of question marks up in the air about characters that do build well into crit. Characters like Viessa, characters like Lepic, characters like Valby, if they're best way to play them now is to be non-crit or crit. So today we're going to be going over that, giving you guys an updated build for 400% dungeons and everything else you need to know about Valby. Hope you guys enjoy the build guide. Let's get right into it. The first thing that I do want to mention is Valby is very great at fighting Gluttony. Gluttony was just nerfed, and Valby's best weapon, in my opinion, is the Peacemaker. So if you're going to set up Valby, you can set her up to deal with Gluttony, and then you can make a build for Gluttony with her, and then she's going to benefit in her mobbing from the Peacemaker. I know this is a tougher weapon to acquire, the 4 out of 4. You really do want 4 out of 4, because if you do get 4 out of 4, you're going to incur a 0% skill cost on this weapon. And anytime that you cast a Dimension or Fusion ability, which works great on Valby, you're going to be stacking up to over 40% non-attribute skill power, which is disgusting. This thing makes a massive difference for your damage on Valby, especially in 400% dungeons where you really want to squeak out all of the damage that you can. Now, for 400% dungeons and just general mobbing, Valby used to be one of the best farmers in the game, and she's still really great, but she's got to compete with Freyna. And just to kind of show you some of the multipliers, Valby's 1 is a 31% multiplier, her 2 is a 28% multiplier, her 3 is a 130% multiplier, and her 4th is a 39% multiplier. If we compare that to Freyna, Freyna has a 188 with a 174, a 188 with a 174, a 188 with a 174, and a 768 flat with a 188 and 174, all of which stack. Valby just is getting completely outclassed by Freyna when it comes to damage, and so the build that I wanted to make for Valby is getting as much damage as she possibly can get, and in terms of breaking it down between going for a non-crit build with more quality of life versus a crit build, I've opted for a crit build, which is going to give you significant more damage. Obviously, those modifiers are massive, but with Ultimate Valby, we're now able to invest even more into crit than we could before. We're going to be getting over 76% crit with our abilities, dealing 4 times as much damage. We are going to fully invest into crit on her like 400% mobbing setup so that she has a chance of keeping up in terms of DPS. 4 times damage on all of her abilities, which can stack and tick every second, allows her to actually do some really good damage in dungeons. But when it comes down to it, I will show like a build for like non-crit, which is a little bit more quality of life, but it is significantly less damage, especially if you're going to full invest into crit, which we are going to be doing here. We're using 6 damage mods and some pretty important things. So to start, we are going to be using skill expansion and skill extension. These two give us a good amount of range, and the skill extension, while not as important as you would think for like 400% dungeons, this allows us to basically infinite loop our 4th ability, and our 4th ability is really, really important for 400% dungeons. 1, it's our highest damage multiplier, so it's going to be dealing the bulk of our damage, but it also gives us 50% increased damage reduction, 50% damage reduction in 400% dungeons. We don't have AoE spread to kill 2 rooms over. We are going to be pathing through enemies. We are going to be getting hit, and we want to spend the most amount of time in our 3rd ability as possible, because if we're not in our 3rd ability, it's very easy to take a bunch of damage and die very quickly. So we want as much uptime on this as possible, which we can achieve with skill extension, 2 focus mods, and then we're ideally going to look for a cooldown on a reactor. Those things with MP conversion will allow you to pretty much keep up your 3rd ability all the time. If you're canceling it early, you might have a moment where you're not be able to loop it, but as long as you're staying in it, which we have a 22-second duration in it, you're going to be chilling. Now, we are going to be opting for 4 crit modules on this. Originally, with Valby, I was opting for 3 crit modules and a mana mod, something like MP Collector. And if you're going to rock just normal mobbing on her, as in you're not going to do 400% dungeons, I still recommend doing 3 crit mods with MP Collector. However, if you're going to be rocking the 400% dungeons, it is just so much better to get that extra crit mod. In terms of how much extra damage this crit mod adds, this just adding emergency measures to the build, if we already have 3 crit mods, is a 39% damage increase to our overall net damage, which is disgusting. That's part of the reason why we're not fitting on Decimator here. Decimator is a great mod. It's 50% modifier, but Decimator to our setup is currently only a 25% increase versus emergency measures, a 39% damage increase net. So putting on the 4th crit mod, because we're already invested into crit, is really valuable. There's nothing really else we can drop. We need the cooldown, we need the range, we need the duration, we need the HP, and so you can go for a little bit more quality of life. And showing on screen is a non-crit build, which nets out a little bit more mana conservation. It nets out a little bit more range, but it will definitely deal less damage. And for competing with the current meta, I wanted to go for as much damage as possible. Now, one of the builds that does massively improve from these new non-crit modules are anything that isn't using Supply Moisture. Supply Moisture gives us crazy critical hit rate. Anything that isn't using Supply Moisture will be using the new mods on Valby, and a prime example of that is Hydrobomb. Now, this is a mod that scales a lot of damage, but it's very important that you have enemies before you dive in with this to be inflicted with your laundry debuff. It's going to give you up to 150% increased damage on this. And obviously, without Supply Moisture, Valby only has, well, normally she only has a 5% critical hit chance, but I just kind of want to show you the damage that this can deal now. Real quick, I accidentally deleted my reactor that I was using for this build. I farmed one today and then took it off and then deleted it, but you're going to want a Peacemaker mounting with fusion and non-attribute, and ideally cooldown, which is what I rolled, but it's gone now. But you do need to farm a new reactor for the Hydro Pressure Bomb, because it changes the second ability from a dimension ability to a fusion ability. So you need to farm a new one. I was hoping that wouldn't save, but real quick, just to show you the damage of this. So we're gonna use our 1 so that we apply our dot to all these enemies, make sure they're all dotted, and we can do our little jump. That was a 1.36 million. We've gotten it to hit. I don't think all the enemies were dotted there. I didn't see that number, but it's hitting over 1 million damage as long as you have enemies procced with the dot. There was a 1.45 million. And so this mod massively benefits from the damage increases. A little bit unfortunate for this is, in order to make this build feel good, in my opinion, you want to have a cycle where you can just use your second ability, then use your first ability, use your second ability, use your first ability. And in order to do that, because its cooldown is 18 seconds, we want as much cooldown as possible. And so for this build, I did opt out for a little bit less damage. I'm not using non-attribute specialist, or sorry, power increase. Power increase nets us more damage, but as you can see right now, I'm at 4.6 seconds. As soon as I put this on, now I go all the way to 5.7. And so if you want to value that damage a bit more, it's 17% more damage, you totally can. I valued the cooldown. If you get cooldown in your reactor, you can get this into 3-second range, which feels really good because you can just constantly stay in the air. For other important mods, we're going to want non-attribute amplification for the more power, HP, as much cooldown as we can get. We're using MP conversion, nimble fingers. This we do want to hit in as large of radius as possible. It's got a 250% expandable range, so we're going to be using skill expansion plus a lower ranked maximized range to make sure that we are getting our 155% range, or 155 plus our base of 100, so 255% range. So we're hitting everything that we possibly can. You definitely want focus on fusion for the extra modifier, but mainly the cooldown. And then your last two mods here are kind of up to you. I know that sounds weird, but because we have so much modifier here already, focus on or fusion amplification is technically only a 9% damage increase for the second ability here. Spear and shield I do think is a must, because if we're gonna opt for two non-attribute boosting specific powers, then getting a non-specific skill power is actually a large damage increase, and this unranked spear and shield will net me a larger damage increase than this full fusion amplification. But that is kind of what I opted for. There's not a ton of great mods that you could use there. There is an option if you really wanted to rock multi-talented. With multi-talented, you can click the third ability to proc the dimension cooldown buff, and then click your second ability to proc the cooldown on it. I'd messed around with this. I thought it felt really awkward because you want to be spreading with your one, and then you're clicking way too many abilities, and we don't have a mana mod on, and so I opted to not do that and opted out of multi-talented. As long as you get cooldown on your reactor for this, like, you really don't need multi-talented, but that is the setup for Hydrobomb. For our bossing build, it actually doesn't change at all because we're not spec'd into skill damage, so this is the bossing build that I use. It's mainly focused on using her guns as much as possible and being able to spam her abilities so that we can have full uptime on supply moisture. We're going to get range and duration, which allows us to keep our buffs up. We've got nimble fingers plus time distribution. We don't need like super crazy cooldown, so we opt for time distribution for a little bit more and max HP. We pair that with increased HP, maximize conservation so that we can spam our skills, energy collection, so that if we do get mana, it's gonna get us even more mana so we can spam more. You could technically swap this if you wanted to for like HP collector, but most of the fights we don't really need that in. And then we've got shot focus for more damage and sensory depth so that we take less damage. This is a super solid all around just gun Valby build that should net you really good results on most bosses. However, we do have a separate setup specifically for Gluttony with Spiral Tidal Wave if you want to opt for that. Valby makes Gluttony like 10 times easier if you have a Valby that knows what they're doing. And that really revolves around spamming the one ability at Gluttony so that you can drag all of the orbs at him to cool down his gun so that he never wipes you. With this, we're going to go for HP Collector. HP Collector gives us sustain in the fights. We want as much cooldown as possible, so we're going to go Nimble Fingers and MP Conversion. We want Energy Sustain so that we can spam more, so we're going to grab Energy Collection. Increased HP, maximize conservation for more spam, HP amplification for more survivability, shot focus for gun damage, sensory depth so that we take less damage from Gluttony, and antifreeze solution to increase our chill resistance and make sure that we don't get frozen. With the changes to Gluttony, this isn't as important as it was before. You could technically opt for like more flat chill resist, but frostbite immunity from his actual attacks is still pretty nice, so that's what we're gonna opt for. The big kind of like gameplay loop with this against Gluttony is you're just going to be spamming your one ability at him. It's going to keep him or all the chill orbs basically just sticking to him like glue so that he gets to get cooled down. And then if he ever turns to shoot at you or starts really focusing you, you want to make sure that you proc your third ability. This is going to give you 50% damage reduction plus our 13% damage reduction, and you move faster, so you can basically just dodge all of his damage, and if he does hit you, it's going to hit you for way less with your DR plus your chill resistance. It's just a very, very comfy build for Gluttony, and if you need to get clears, strongly recommend speccing into it. For Valby's weapons, for bossing, I mainly rock the Enduring Legacy. This is the build that I use. It hasn't changed. However, if you are going to bring her into Gluttony, you do want to make one important change, and that is to remove Sharp Precision Shot. With you spamming your one out, you just won't have the time to build up your Sharp Precision Shot to make it the highest DPS setup. And so you do have to swap this for Mental Focus. Mental Focus does not care if you are using your abilities, it'll just keep your damage and maintain it. So while Mental Focus is less damage, it doesn't really matter because you need to be spamming your one. So note, for Valby Gluttony, use Mental Focus. For literally everything else, rock Sharp Precision Shot. It is the highest DPS module for the Enduring Legacy. strongly recommend using this setup. The only change that I will do is if I'm fighting something that is resistant to fire, I will just toss on something like Edging Shot instead of the fire enhancement mod here. If something is not weak to fire, doesn't really make sense to use fire, and we can squeak out a little bit more critical hit rate on Valby, which with Supply Moisture brings this to 100% critical hit rate, which is very, very nice. For her reactor, I'd strongly recommend looking for either cooldown or duration so that you can keep up her dots and her third ability. Either or is really important. And then I'd probably go for a boost ratio to get some extra damage out of her on her mobbing setup. Crit chance and crit damage also work really well if you can find those. Any of those four combination, I would definitely go for. But cooldown and duration are quite nice on her setup. For her components, if you wanted to squeak out even more damage out of her, you could rock 2-piece battle aesthetics for the skill critical hit rate. I honestly wouldn't really recommend this though. It is going to net you more damage, but these only roll defense and max shield, so you're going to lose survivability. We already have a lot of critical hit rate and damage. I usually am just making sure that I'm rocking at least 2-piece annihilation on her for the extra duration is super, super nice. You could technically rock 4-piece annihilation, which is what I do recommend for bossing, but I've just opted to use the highest HP things. Right now we're sitting at 22,000 HP on her like bossing setups, which makes her feel really, really cozy. You can tank a lot of damage, plus you get the 50% DR anytime you're in her third ability. Guys, that's going to do it for the Valby build update. I know that maybe she didn't change as much as you wanted to, but I do think that Valby is one of the Descendants that she still nets out much better going into full crit rather than some of these other Descendants that will opt for non-crit damage. And that's going to do it for the build guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.